Hi, yeah, thank you for having us. So I'm Gemma Westwood. I'm a senior digital education developer at the University of Birmingham, and my main area of focus is assessment. But also I'm a keen role player myself, so the idea of bringing in role play and assessment together is really interesting to me. And I'm hoping that we can share a bit of a quest that Mel and I have to explore this in a little bit more detail and hopefully kind of lead out into working with students on the idea of using tabletop role-playing games as an assessment tool. I'm going to hand over to Mel, who's going to introduce herself and take you through the institutional context of what we're working with at the moment. So take it away, Mel.
Thanks very much, Gemma. This is where I have to make a slight confession about the fact that Gemma is absolutely the TTRPG expert out of the two of us. But we're lucky to be able to work in a department where we're allowed to take time out to kind of like think about some blue sky solutions sometimes. And so this project just came out of a conversation that we were both having about how we might be able to reimagine primarily for formative assessment. And Penny started to drop about the potential for bringing together lots of the issues that we were facing as an institution, and how we might be able to use TTRPG to resolve some of them. So next slide, please, Gemma. So we're both based in HEFi, which is the Higher Education Futures Institute in the university, and in common with lots of other institutions all over the world, I'm sure we have a problem with academic colleagues working in silos. It's very difficult quite often for people to be aware of what a colleague down the corridor is working on, let alone somebody who's working perhaps in a completely different department in a discipline where you might imagine there might be very little overlap, but as HEFi's able to kind of like facilitate these conversations, of course you find out there's a lot more commonality and people are sharing the same issues. So on the one hand, we want to try and develop the conversations where we can share best practice, but also to find ways where we can develop solutions that we can apply across the whole of the institution. So we spoke to both staff and students, and the kind of like the blue sky formative assessment conversations that we ended up having with people condensed down to these issues for the staff. So they wanted something that was going to be flexible so that they could easily customize it to their own needs, equally scalable, so across a small or a very large department, and also something that would give them the opportunity to embed the UOB's graduate attributes into it. And so these are a set of characteristics that the university has arrived on that they want the students to be able to demonstrate when they leave, that they've got good employability skills such as good teamwork, communication, leadership, those kind of things. And staff also said that in order to get the most out of the students, they also wanted to be able to embed some kind of authentic formative assessment in their modules. And so we also had conversations with the students, and we were really relieved actually to discover that there was quite a lot of overlap between what the staff wanted and what the students wanted. So likewise, the students were very keen on authentic formative assessment to give them the opportunity to demonstrate the skills that they're requiring as they go through their courses. They also wanted to be able to work with the graduate attributes. Words like engaging started to come out. They also wanted opportunities for group work. And occasionally what also came out is that the students thought actually it might be quite nice if what they were doing was fun as well. So those are the conversations that we had. So then we went back and we reviewed what we were doing at the moment. And in common with lots of other institutions, we rely quite heavily on MCQs in modules for students to undertake their formative assessment. As it says there, we acknowledge that they're much loved, they've served a purpose, but looking at the requirements of both the staff and the students, they're not really meeting the needs of either group of members of the university going forward. So that was when Gemma and I started to have the conversations that led to this project. So we thought we could actually escape from the tyranny of the multiple choice question with TTRPGs. And so we thought it would be much more fun to try and see if we could develop escape rooms where the students could work collaboratively to try and solve a puzzle to test their knowledge of their module so far. And at that point, I will hand over to Gemma, who can actually describe how we did it.
Okay, so what we've created, and this is a very early system that we've built. It's not been tested with students yet. We've tested it within the department, but it hasn't actually gone much further. So we really would like any feedback that you have as I go through this. So we took the university's graduate attributes, which I've listed on the side for you there, and I've aligned those with attributes within D&D. We've had to amend them slightly to make them fit, and it's a mixture, I would say, of several systems. So although there's a fair amount of D&D 5th edition used to build up this system, there's also a system called Teeth, which is a very early system. I'm not sure many people will have come across it yet, but it's a horror-based system and has some quite interesting ways of using attributes and character building and that kind of thing that we've built in. So we've kind of mixed the two systems together. So our attributes then, we've moved across things like academic excellence to cover in intelligence, so subject knowledge, students' intellectual curiosity, the way they apply that knowledge to whatever puzzle that they're working in. We've built across the leaders into the leadership section, so creativity, looking at reflection, also being responsible for your team and supporting your team to come up with solutions. Then we've moved across things like ethical and active citizens into charisma and into the resilience in the community, which I'll come back to in a moment. But charisma building in your standard things like communication and listening, but also building in things like teamwork as well. And then we've built in your standard wisdom with problem solving and critical thinking, leading back into kind of academic excellence. What we also then did was build these kind of token recording areas. So you've got resilience and community, and these can be awarded at the GM's discretion, and there are certain points where it makes sense for them to be awarded. So resilience would be awarded if the GM felt that someone showed a specific level of resilience or did a particularly good job at solving a particular puzzle. Or it could also be attached to the weight of the dice roll as well, depending upon how an academic wanted to use the system. And then community points can be awarded to the party in general. And the idea with community points is that if you're working with several groups of students, maybe in a seminar situation, you almost can use it as a little bit of competition. So at the end of the set of puzzles that you're working with, you could go with the group that's got the highest level of community points, could be the group that won whatever game that you're trying to run through. Okay, so these are the base character sheets that we came up with. So to make it much easier for staff and students, rather than having dice rolls to build up your attributes, we gave a specific number. So you can have a total of 8 across each attribute, across the whole set of attributes, and 4 within each. Now we've got some pre-made character sheets that could just be lifted and used and maybe adapted by discipline, or you've got a blank character sheet that can be used with students either in a session before running a game or in advance of a session in a flipped classroom scenario. A couple of things just to note on the character sheet. Firstly, the inventory. So it's not a standard inventory from a Dungeons and Dragons sense. This is something that we've borrowed from the role-playing game Teeth that I mentioned earlier. It's much more of what I like to term a Schrodinger's inventory. So all of the things that are in the inventory are available to students to be used, but as soon as they've chosen it, they've got it forever. And they can only choose a maximum of 3 throughout whatever adventure or puzzle you're doing with those students. And the things in those inventories can be adapted based on the puzzles, and the aim is that they use them creatively to resolve the puzzles, and therefore may end up gaining more resilience points from the GM or more community points for the group as a whole. We also have special abilities. These work very similar to feats in D&D, but certain characters, as with feats, would have certain special abilities, and those may help the team to be able to complete whatever tasks they're doing. So in the pre-made one, there are suggested ones there based on what that particular character's focus is. In the student one, there's instructions for students to be able to create these themselves, and it gives the opportunity for them to kind of link those feats back into those graduate attributes, or equally to whatever skill is trying to be assessed whilst that particular activity is taking place. So what we've got is a base adventure. So our base adventure is called Escape from the Colosseum. It's a full script created for a 3 to 4 puzzle adventure. It's designed mainly for an introduction to Latin languages, but you could adapt it for anything. When we ran it through with staff, there were suggestions that you could change the location and have it run through for chemistry and have it run through for physics. So the adventure itself focuses on assessing certain skills that will be needed in probably the first couple of sessions of learning Latin. So things like alphabet and number recognition. So to get them to look at alphabet and numbers, we decided to work with the Latin alphabet and a numerical system to open a lock to escape from a cell at the bottom of the Colosseum. Then moving into things like sentence structure. So in this task, students move towards what looks almost like a medical room for where gladiators might get patched up. And on the surgical desk, they have to open up a chest, and the chest tells them in Latin to take a gem. That gem is cursed, and each individual student is then required to speak in a certain grammatical sentence structure, and they are unable to leave that room until all students have figured out what sentence structure each individual character is speaking in. The next one involves sort of simple translation of words and short sentences. In this one, students have to place statues of different nymphs onto plinths, and they need to make sure that the nymph is on the corresponding statue to be able to open the door at the other end of the room. And then the final one, which is quite possibly my favourite one, is early verb conjugation. And I must admit, I did steal this from Monty Python. But the idea is that the students need to correct the spelling on the graffiti on the wall to be able to be let past by the guard who's holding the door at the exit of the Colosseum, and therefore to be able to escape. So our main quest then is to create this bank of resources for academics that they can kind of dip in and out of. So it would include basic gameplay instructions, a bank of adaptable puzzles with full scenario-based instructions, like the ones that you can download offline if you want to just run a really quick one-shot or a quick campaign. a list of the tools that we ourselves as DMs probably use. So things like online map creation tools like Incarnate, lists of free dice rollers that they can use within and adapt to the university's VLE, and then instructions on how you can use the university's core digital tools like our VLE, like our recording tools and our polling tools, and how we can apply these into those sessions. And then also we'd like to adapt it further and look at building virtual escape rooms from these scenarios or puzzles, aimed directly at distance learning courses, with the idea of fostering that community with students, or even just allowing for a different way of them being able to be assessed, which is not just an online quiz. So we have a small example of that one. So I'm just going to have to escape from here for a moment and share that screen with you. Let me just come there, just so that you can see where we are. So here we are. So this is a 3D virtual escape room using ThingLink. And to create the room, and I'll move it around in a moment so that you can see how it works, we also used Bing AI generator for any static images that we used, Blockade Skyblocks Labs, which is an AI tool that creates 3D spaces, and synesthesia.io, which creates an AI person that will read out and give you instructions. So we've got students can then play with the room, read through the instructions. Now I know that, and then they can listen to the individual person explain, and then they can explore the different tabs areas for additional clues. And then when ready, they could click proceed and then get through the door to the next area. So the main thoughts, let me just stop sharing for a moment and then reshare the PowerPoint. So the main thoughts behind what we've created is to take this forward and share it with academics at the university to gain some insight from those of you in here that are interested in game design. And we are primarily educational developers, so we don't have a main background in game design. So any comments that people have got on this, or any suggestions that people could make to make this easier and adaptable, would be really welcome from our point of view. But our next steps, as I said, are to share this with a select group of academics. HEFi has a bank of HEFi scholars who are academic staff who are open to testing and trialing these new kind of assessment techniques with their students on a small scale. So that we can get that information back, look at adapting and sharing that research on this, and seeing what effect it does have on not just students' the ability to assess students' individual skills within a particular academic medium, but also in supporting and building those graduate attributes, and as well in improving students' opinion on assessment and feedback in a more general term. Does doing something that's more active and more engaging actually improve students' thoughts on how assessment and feedback is given to them, and support students to move forward and to achieve their goals academically, and on a more personal and employability scale in a way that would improve those individual things like university NSS scores, and to help them get into the world of employment after they've completed their studies. So that's roughly where we are with that at the moment. So I really do invite any of you to share any comments or to have any ask us any specific questions as well.